In a world where we have everything and it's still not enough, we're often left wondering, is this really it?
Deep inside, you know there's more to life. You're ready to leave behind the old push your way through and claim the deeper, more meaningful life that's calling you.
That's what we invite you to explore with us.
We're your hosts,
Stephanie Allen
and Maren. And this is the Soulful Leader Podcast.
Yay! Hi, welcome to the Soulful Leader Podcast. This is Stephanie, and I'm here with Maren. And the topic today we are looking into are values. Now, I know we've talked about values in the past, but this is a deeper reflection on that. And I just had learned something in an inquiry the other day about values, thinking, I finally am starting to discover what my values are and getting really anchored with them. And then someone threw me a curveball and basically said, well, have you looked at your extrinsic values or your intrinsic values? I'm like, what on God's earth name are you talking about? I have no idea. I thought I just got it all figured out. And I think that's the whole point, is that values are something that you live by. And often we're told what our values should or shouldn't be. And, if you want to achieve something in this other world, then, there are values that you need to align with to get there. But we don't often define them as outer, like extrinsic, or internal or intrinsic. And it's really got me thinking and even looking at, what are intrinsic goals? And how do you even discover them?
I love that, because so many times I think that with values, we don't even realize what our values are. Like you started the conversation with, you thought you finally got it figured out, right? And the reason we don't realize what our values are is because we adopt them. They get layered into our lives from very early on in childhood, and through subtle messaging, and through advertising, and through what we want, and what, where we live. And so it is a deep dive to look at what are our values. And so I guess for me, I've always thought that values are by nature intrinsic. They're internal.
Yeah, because nobody really knows them except
Right.
for yourself.
They're
That's what we look
inside
at,
me,
yeah.
right? And when you mentioned that to me of intrinsic and extrinsic values, it did help me to be like, oh, so those are values about me and my internal life. And then there's also values about me and my external goals. Well, I like that word that you used, goals, because it is kind of like how we interact with the world, our extrinsic values.
And I often think of like anxiety and depression and stress. It's often when we're not aligned with our values. But I hadn't really thought about them as intrinsic or extrinsic. And we might say, well, I am aligned with my values. My life is really good. I've got a lot going on. And, I have a great neighborhood. I live in a good home, and I have got a great job, and I'm making a difference in the world. And, I'm checking all the boxes. But something's off. Something's off. I still feel like there's something missing, or I'm lonely or anxious or stressed about something and I don't even know what it is. Then I would, to me, that is the internal guidance of saying, then there's an internal or an intrinsic value that is off, that's needing to come up to be really honored. And that takes an inward looking exploration.
So do you have an example of each of those, of an intrinsic value and an extrinsic value that you could share?
Well, yeah, I mean, interesting. I just led 20 women on an adventure and a tour. So as I was leading this tour with a group of women, I realized that there was 15 of them that were really harmonizing and totally engaged and really easy to work with. And there were 5 that were absolutely irritating. And they were irritated as well, that nothing could make them happy. No matter what we did, it could be, good Lord, we could have like had tea with the King of England or something, and it still wouldn't have been good enough. Like it was just, they were just really challenging. And I realized that they were, the ones that were really challenging were totally based on the external. So there was certain things that were meant to happen in this tour. And because of circumstances, there was a fire and rerouting and road closures and different things. We could not, no matter what happened, we could not go to those certain areas. So no matter what we replaced them with, it wasn't going to be good enough. Because they had signed up for an external measure. Now, the women that were totally okay with it were like, okay, it sucks, but it's out of my control. I can't really do anything. But I'm really on this tour for an intrinsic value of meeting friends and taking time for myself and enjoying the beauty in the world and learning something new. And they had a completely different operating system. And it was much more in flow to be able to be with those women. And so when I look at it myself, one of the questions they tend to ask me, which it's funny, years ago, I left a province because the taxes were so freaking high. I was so irritated because I was doing my own business and I was like, man, I'm paying a ton of taxes. This is ridiculous. I'm going to move to a province where I don't pay so much taxes and then I'll be happier. So I did. So I moved. This was in my 20s. These are the things you learn. And lo and behold, I realized I wasn't actually any happier.
So the external marker didn't impact the internal.
Not at all. Didn't even freaking touch it. And yet, it was just such an interesting experience to me. And then years later, I ended up moving back to the province that has a lot of high taxes. And I totally loved it. And I realized that my internal value had a lot to do with inclusivity, like being able to have empathy for myself and others, to create an environment that nourishes and supports and grows and educates, and that I cared about the environment. And then I realized that all my high tax was actually going to those very value things, but they're internal values to me. I was told the external value was about money, was about success, was about achievement, all those different things. But I was not honoring my internal. So even though I went to another place where I did have achievement and success and all those things, my internal values weren't honored. So I still wasn't happy.
So really, it's about aligning the internal with the external and with ourselves.
Yeah, it's like that inhale, exhale again. It's like, not to say that the external is bad. It's not. It's just that it's empty and it's incomplete without the internal.
I was going to say that it's not empty in and of itself. It's empty without the other side of it.
Exactly.
If we just put all of our eggs in that basket, then we end up being irritated and irritating.
Exactly. And I think about the times in my life where I've made just the external values important. Like, okay, I'm going to save money. I'm going to make I don't know. I'm going to work with 20 people and I'm going to measure it. And again, I'm not saying that that's bad or wrong. It's just that if I haven't looked at why is that important? If I haven't looked at a deeper level that touches my heart and my soul, it's empty.
Yeah.
And anytime I've ever tried to do just the external, I'm, like you said, I'm irritating and irritated. I'm both. And then when I flip it though, when I actually just reorient my life from an internal place and I let go of the external expectations or performance, not that I don't care about it. I'm not saying that. It's just that I'm not attached to it. That I know it's going to come another way, or that because I've put the internal first, I always make more of a difference, more money. I have more energy. I have more time. I have more everything.
And you enjoy things more.
Oh my gosh, and I'm happier and I'm not irritating. or irritated.
Yeah. Like, I mean, with the women on your tour, if because of circumstances, you can't do what was planned and you're so attached to that nothing else will measure up, you're not going to be happy the whole time. Right. And
Yeah.
I totally relate to that. I have done that to myself in my life over and over and over again. And to get to the place where I can let go of the outer expectation of, I don't know what it's going to look like. It may or may not look, I've noticed that I say it may or may not look like I expect it to. To be honest, it almost never looks like I expect it to.
Exactly.
And when I let go and surrender, it always looks better. It's always better.
Well, and I also wonder if that is not the imbalance of our internal and external values, if that may not be the precursor to a lot of mental and emotional illness. And I'm using that because, of course, been watching the Olympics, and I, as a gymnast myself, I just love watching gymnastics, and very much a cheerleader of Simone Biles. And knowing in the last Olympics, she admittedly took time for herself to say, I need to work on my mental health. And I was watching an interview with her where, she had come second and she had fallen off the beam, and she had made not a perfect performance, which would have been an external value. And here she was saying to the newscaster, she goes, I'm a different person now. Like, in the old me would have been completely a mess. But I've been really working on those internal parts so that not only, I'm talking of the floor exercise, that not only did she get second, but she also bowed to the woman who got first, who got gold. And to me, that comes from an internal sense. And that's where what the Olympics was all about, and what we look at business or life or community is really, how can we help each other? How can we support and stand for each other? And that means we have to transcend and include the external values. But we can't just live from the external.
Yeah. I had the privilege of watching the pole vaulters, and they were essentially tied. It's a beautiful scene. So if you get a chance, there's a little recap on YouTube, and they had a choice to continue so that there was eventually a winner, or to agree to be tied for a gold medal. And they chose to, the female pole vaulters, they chose to, yeah, you know what? And the interview afterward, what they said about it, what the one woman said about it was that she's like, we were basically the same through the whole thing. Why wouldn't the tie, like, why wouldn't we honor, and there's that honor, right? Why wouldn't we honor each other like that?
Yeah. It does come. It does come from a different place, doesn't it?
It does.
It comes from an inclusive place and a togetherness, and that doesn't mean that there isn't a push for growth and evolution. In fact, I think that actually helps a lot easier to grow and evolve when you're pushing and growing together.
Yeah, when you know that you have support. One of the things that I noticed as I watched the video clip was, throughout the competition, they were cheering each other on. I loved that. So often in competitions, it's me versus you. And it was. They were pushing each other. They were cheering each other on. Like, neither of them wanted the other one to do badly in order for them to win. They wanted to win at the, in the place where we both put all of ourselves into it. And I won.
Yeah.
And then, since neither of them, I mean, you get to the point where you're just exhausted and you're like, okay, we're done. Right. And so at that point, yes, now both of us walk away holding our heads high and being like, yeah, we put
they set
everything.
A new precedence. They set a new precedence for these things. And I think that's what we're here to learn, even in business. It's like that win at all costs. Like,
including the other person.
Or the planet, or our ethics, or our values, or like, why? For what point? For what purpose? It's like even relationships. It's like, do you want to be right or do you want to be intimate? Meaning, can we evolve to a place where we can be together and still have differences? Like that is, I think that takes a lot of internal work.
And those are the intrinsic values of, I do value that, so I will pursue it. And I want to know what that looks like in the external world. And I think we got two great examples of what that looks like. Having certain intrinsic values of community and cooperation and collaboration and taking care of ourselves.
So for somebody who's listening and they're saying, gosh, I'm just starting to kind of get a grip on my values. And now you're telling me I got to kind of look deeper and look at my internal and my external. Where would you start with somebody? What would you tell them?
I think that for me, first of all, great question, because I don't know that it's here's the answer. I think it's let's explore this answer, because as we mentioned at the beginning, this is kind of a new concept for both of us too, of values are not values are not values. We can actually start to pull them apart a little bit. Be like, well, is that an intrinsic or an extrinsic value? So I think that would probably be where I would start, is if you have a list of values, I guess back up, what is your list of values? What are the things that you value in life? And actually write down those values. And then look at them and say, is that an internal value or is it an external value? And the way that I would probably tell the difference is if it's something that somebody else can see, how much money I make, what kind of car I drive, what kind of house I have, it's probably an extrinsic value. If it's something that somebody can't see, like the fact that I value community and that I value mental health and my own health, and those are more intrinsic values. That's my first stab at kind of what those differences are. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I go back to my taxes story, because I had to make peace with that. And I said, I had to go into the internal values of my value is to make a difference in the lives of others and to do what I've come to do. Meaning, I believe that every being has a unique, it's like a thumbprint. They have a unique signature, that there's something that they're here to do in this world. There's something they're here to become, and both. There's your external and internal. And I wanted to be a good citizen. I want to make a difference. So when I came home, I said, okay, I'm paying these taxes. Isn't it great? I have enough financial abundance that I can now contribute to the taxes. And those taxes are going for education and they're going for healthcare. Two values I deeply stand for, that I believe, and this is where I would go internally. I would say, I believe everyone has a right to better themselves educationally, and that everyone has a right to health and well-being, whether it be physical, mental, spiritual, emotional health. And to me, that's a human right. So I started to realize that really my internal values are human rights and empathy and inclusiveness and, equality. And so I had to keep practicing that with myself too, like where I am not, where I'm not really equal within myself, where I shame parts of myself, or where I ignore parts of myself and exclude them instead of bringing them together in a conversation with myself. So what I mean by that is that I become a witness of these parts, that the part that kind of gets irritated or irritable, and the other part that just wants to ignore it and go away, to bring both of those parts together, because I need to practice that internally inside myself, realizing there's a part of me that's really ticked off with these 5 women, say, on my tour, who were literally disrespecting everything. And then there's another part of me that wants to just ignore it. And I have to look at both. And I go, well, what is it? Do I care more about control and being, a performer? Or do I care more about the environment of which we're fostering and what it's teaching within me too? Because it actually brought up a lot for me to learn. So
it always will.
Yeah, I guess that would be my internal sense of like taking time to look inside, not out of shame or blame, not out of guilt or any of those things, but just as a witness. And it was such a good teaching for me too, because I think of in relationships, are we in relationships with people because of their external or extrinsic values? Because who they are? Like who and what, their performance and what they're bringing into this, or what kind of character are they? It's like that old saying of like, who are you when no one's looking? To me, I don't want to just, because if you're friends with somebody or in relationship with somebody who's just because, hey, they're going to introduce me to all kinds of great people and, they're up to something and they're really successful, financial, then you're actually using them. In some ways, if it's just an external thing, versus going, and they're a really great person. They're kind, they're loving, they're empathetic. I'm a better person when I'm with them. I like myself more when I'm with them. To me, that's an intrinsic goal. It's like there's something more going on under the surface than just an external.
And I think, everybody's in a different place in their lives.
Yeah.
Where sometimes we just need to do one or the other. I have been there where it's really important to me to have all of that extrinsic, right? And then I've also been in the places where I was like, I don't want to deal with any of that. I just want to go inside. So it's not about the judgment. It's not this one's better than that one. Like you always say with the inhale and the exhale. Sometimes we just get caught inhaling the entire time or exhaling the entire time, right? So wherever you are, I think the key is awareness of like, hey, that's just where I am right now. And that's okay. I won't be here forever. So I think that the thing for me around really, they're just words, intrinsic and extrinsic and even values. And the value behind going deeper with it is not to define each of these things in our lives, is to bring awareness to it.
Yeah.
That's the up level.
You'll have a deeper relationship or leadership role when you can be aware.
Yeah.
And then who you're serving and who, like I said, I look at these 5 women that were on it's like we did not have the same intrinsic values. We didn't. And I don't know if they even would have recognized what their intrinsic values, but it's just, I can't convince them to have my intrinsic.
No.
That it's, but I could accept that that's where they were and that's where I am. And
that's different. Right. So that's the benefit of the awareness, because when you can recognize, oh, we're just different, then it takes you out of the blame and shame game, and you can allow somebody to be where they are, and you don't take on all of their whatever they're projecting onto you. And so it makes your life easier. And as leaders, that's huge, because we're constantly working with people who are at all different levels of awareness themselves and value systems, et cetera, et cetera. So the awareness piece is what will change your life.
Absolutely. And when we think of culture, like, a community culture or a workplace culture, when we can align in our values, not just extrinsic, but to really develop the intrinsic, that's when magic really will happen. And I think it's worth a chance and a willingness to explore what they are and what they aren't.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we would love to hear from you about your values in general. And what are your thoughts about whether understanding the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic values, do you think it would serve you to understand that better? Or is it just something, a mental exercise? We'd love to hear from you. So you can find us at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com. You can also find us on social media at The Soulful Leaders. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you all next week.
And that wraps up another episode of the Soulful Leader Podcast with your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren Oslack. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper, head over to our website at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com.
Until next time.